we have all these options in how we approach aging. But the ones that we are most shamed for is the way we look. If you have things done, then boo you because you're taking the easy way out and you're a rich bitch who can afford it. Or you don't do it and then you're like, grandma, get some Botox, you're looking really haggard. There's like no way to win for a woman. If you choose to do something about the shame that's getting heaped on you by fixing your face, then you're going to get shamed for that. And if you don't do it, you're going to get shamed for that too. To me, it just made sense to try to eliminate the shame that I felt when people told me I was old and ugly, rather than acquiesce to their desires and make myself look the way they think I should look.
Well, hello and welcome to a very special episode of The Terri Cole Show. I'm so excited for you to hear this deep dive with Paulina Porizkova, who just wrote this beautiful book called No Filter, The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful. And if you don't know who she is, maybe you don't, but she was a massively huge supermodel in the 80s and the 90s. She was married to Ric Ocasek from the Cars. She was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1984. That was her first cover for them, but she had done many covers prior. So, I mean, really, she started successfully modeling at 17 and was everywhere in the U.S. She's from Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic. And really what the book is about, it's a collection of essays that I found so compelling, you guys. I stayed up till 3 a.m. to finish it. It was so good. I loved it so much. And part of, I think, why I was so drawn into some of the stories is that some of you do know, some of you don't know. Before I was a psychotherapist, I was a talent agent for supermodels and celebrities. That's what I did, is I negotiated contracts. And so I can't believe my path never crossed with Paulina back in the day. So I was a little bit later than her, maybe 5 years later is when I started in beauty and entertainment as an agent. So a lot of the players that she was talking about and the horrendous experiences that she had in the modeling world were so familiar, and actually were the reasons why I left entertainment and became a psychotherapist, is that I had really tried to change that broken system. One of the chapters she calls, They Called Us Girls. And that was one of my beefs when I was running the TV department at Ford Modeling Agency. And Eileen Ford was no longer the head of it. It was her daughter, Katie Ford. And I remember I would go into Katie's office and all of the bookers who booked the models on the jobs would refer to the models as girls, even though we were representing like Jerry Hall, who was like in her 40s at the time. And I mean, I would go in to talk to Katie about a lot of things I had problems with, but that was one of them. And she was finally like, Terri, do you really want to do this for a living? And I was thinking, I really don't. And I ended up getting out of that business. But there is so much beauty in this interview with Paulina. She is so honest. She is so unfiltered, talking about aging and the pressures that we experience. We talked about so many different things. I loved interviewing her so much. Just felt like a girlfriend jam. So I really hope that you enjoy listening to this interview. And I really do encourage you to go get the book. The author is Paulina Porizkova. The book is called No Filter, The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful. Now on to the interview. Wow, I'm so excited to welcome Paulina Porizkova to the show. Welcome, Paulina.
Hello, Terri, and it's so great to be here with you in nearly real life.
Kind of real life, not exactly real life. Wow, is all I'm saying. You guys who are listening can't see that I'm holding up the beautiful cover of Paulina's book called No Filter, The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful. And I read this book cover to cover. Literally, I went to sleep at 3 a.m. last night. I couldn't put it down. I have so many questions, but let's just start with,
Ooh.
What inspired you to write this book now?
Well, it wasn't so much inspiration as perspiration, to tell you honestly. What happened was last year in the summer, end of the summer last year, I got a call from Maria Shriver, whom I don't know, as a person, but of course
Wow.
I'm Maria Shriver. And I thought it was a prank call. I was like, what? Why is Maria Shriver calling me? And it turns out, she said, I follow you on Instagram and I've just started an imprint and I only want to publish a few books a year that will be positive and good for the world. And I would love for you to write me a book, sort of the way you write Instagram. And that really inspired me because I thought, well, I'm writing this stuff every day anyway. This is all, it's all like stocked up in me in either case. And so I could be more in depth. I could expand on the things that I think about. And that inspired me. That's the offer she made. And then she gave me 3 months to write it.
How amazing. This is exactly how much time I had to write my first book. So,
oh, really? Well, so it's
the
like,
stress.
whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk about I actually know you through a mutual friend, Jen Pasteloff. That's how, obviously I knew who you were prior to that. And then I started following you on Insta as well. Paulina, you're just talking about, we're the same age. So you're talking about all of the things that all of the women in my life in our age range are experiencing. So I see what you're doing as being super courageous, right? Putting it out there. So what is inspiring you, or why are you sharing yourself in this way, this very honest, this unfiltered, hence the name of the book, people, no filter. But what inspired you to do it?
You know what? I've always been unfiltered. It's not like I suddenly got unfiltered. Like I was always super private, and then I went unhinged, and I was like, "Let me tell you all my secrets." No, I was always the person that if you asked me a question, I would respond to it honestly because I love the connection between people when you speak to each other and you listen. And I feel like to some extent I've been deprived of that with my career and with my marriage. That was, my husband was a very private person and he liked to keep a very small, select group around him. And I feel like it had been building inside me this desire to connect, the desire to talk. And it's sort of like people didn't really want to hear me. They just wanted to see me. It was like, shut up and be beautiful. Like, don't have any opinions so that I can make you into whatever I want. It's a perfect role for a model, right? You're one dimensional, so you can read anything you want into that one dimensional paper doll image. It was just never me. I always felt like I had more to contribute than just the way I looked.
What's interesting about your trajectory is that in the book, you talk about the fact that, you were so young when you got into modeling in Paris. You were on your own, and you had a lot of being on your own, I see in the book, and sort of making decisions and having to like figure stuff out. And then you come to New York, and then you get hired to be in the Cars video, and you meet your husband of decades, Ric Ocasek. And so what was that like? Because in the beginning of that, it seemed like his fame bubble, kind of as you called it in the book, was sort of small because he was so highly visible.
Right.
Think back to that time, like, wow, the cars were everywhere.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. You go on this, you get the job, you're going to be in, who's going to take you home? You're going to be in the music video. Then what happens?
Well, you know what? I sort of had I had a crush on him before I even did the video because I had just come into the United States. I had gotten my MTV. Now we're talking 1984. And I saw this video late at night of this guy that I just like, I was transfixed by the way he looked initially. And for this, you have to know the context that my early childhood crushes was Julius Caesar and Mr. Spock from Star Trek. So, this is what I thought was really sexy guys. And so when I saw my husband in this video, I thought, oh my God, he's just like, if I ever got to meet anybody famous, I would like to meet him. And so I remembered his name, which was at the bottom of the video. And then when I got the casting call for the Cars, I didn't know the Cars contained Ric Ocasek because I was from Europe and I didn't know the band, the Cars. And when I initially met the band, they were just sort of all sitting around the table in this hotel room. And I was looking around at them and I thought, oh, okay, they're kind of old. I think they were like in their 30s and I'm 19. and they were supposed to take me out to dinner before we started the video. So I'm waiting, and they're chatting. I go, are we waiting for something? Because I'm kind of hungry. And they're like, yeah, we're just waiting for Rick. And then the door opens from the adjoining room, and the guy from the video walks out, and I literally started hyperventilating. Like, it was a good thing I was sitting on the floor and not standing up, because I was like, oh, I think I'm going to pass out. That's the guy. That's the guy. And he just focused in on me with his turquoise eyes, and just like he went right for me. It was like a homing missile. Boom. Here, you are mine. And I was like, yes, I'm yours.
And that was the beginning of a 30-something year marriage?
Well, we were married for 30. We were together for, I guess, 33, 35 if you include the last years that we lived together, but we're separated. So yeah, this is 35 years of my life with this man. Yes.
Wow. So what do you think made you perfectly aligned for Rick?
I don't know. Can I swear on your program?
You can.
Okay, great. Well, it was our fuck-uppedness. That's why we were perfectly aligned. We had similar scars, but in slightly different places, so that my scars wouldn't rub up against his scars, but they sort of complemented each other. But this is me at 19 and him at 41. So obviously, as I grew up, the scars no longer aligned quite as well. And this is when things started getting more difficult. When I wanted to sort of, I had become a mother, and I was taking care of the house, and I was taking care of, his children and our children, and sort of trying to make life pleasant for everybody. And my husband kept working, but at some point he sort of stopped working that much. And then I thought, well, hold on, I'm still doing all my work and you're not doing any. So could we have a little more balance here? But he had already been the man that he was the man that I met. He hadn't changed. I had changed.
Right.
So it wasn't really his fault.
Right. But it's life. Like, you grow, and then you try to figure out, how am I going to fit into this box that we built when I was 19, now that I'm 45, or now that I'm 48. Yeah. And from what you're writing in the book, it also, there was a real obsession that each of you had for the other. And you also feel like there was some clamping down on your career from Rick. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, like I said, his brand of love was very possessive. He was extremely jealous. He was a man that focused on the things he loved, which was music and me. And we got all of his attention. And to me, that felt so good. It's like I found the one person that had some narcissistic traits, like my parents, but this one was fully focused on me. I mean, it's like I won the jackpot. It's like everything that was familiar to me, but this time it didn't want to leave me, or it wasn't disregarding me. In fact, he was, obsessed with me. And I drew that as true love.
Right. So tell us a little bit about how your childhood experience played into this.
My parents sort of accidentally abandoned me when I was 3 years old, because they were leaving the then Czechoslovakia, because the Soviets were invading it. And they were very young, and they were hoping for a better life. And, and a motorcycle weaving between tanks was perhaps not the best place for a 3-year-old. So they left me behind with my grandmother. And I guess they figured, once they got out of the country, they could go to the Red Cross, they could go to these organizations and then get me. Well, that, of course, didn't work out. So I was stuck there, and they were stuck in Sweden. I feel like I had lived with my grandmother most of the time anyway. I think this is a kind of a cultural thing to a certain extent. My mother was 19 when she had me. So, I would stay at Babichka's house every time my mom wanted to go and party in the pub, which was apparently a lot, and my dad, because they were just young 20-year-olds. And so I was very comfortable with my Bobby, my grandma. And when they left, I mean, it was scary because everybody was really tense in the household, and there was a lot of crying from my grandmother, and I didn't know what had happened. I kept thinking, 'cause I'm 3 at this point. I was wondering if perhaps my parents had gone to heaven, but I wasn't entirely sure what that was either. So I just took it for what it was worth. Also, another little story is that my dad had a motorcycle on which they escaped. And he would put me on the front gas tank, and we would, he'd take me around the block, and I'd go, "Daddy, go faster, go faster." And he'd say, "I can't, because with your big ears, you're just going to sail right off the bike." Well, that had the unintended consequence that when they did leave, I thought, oh, they wanted to go fast and they left me behind because of my big ears. So to this day, I have I feel like my ears are inordinately big for what they actually are. But I was with my grandmother, and of course my grandmother was my grandmother. I was her last baby. I was her last chance at motherhood. So she reared me with this slightly obsessive, "I like you best. You matter the most in my life. Without you, I would kill myself." So this was all, this is what I knew as love. Right. And when my mother came back to kidnap me in an event that actually did not succeed, and she was put in jail, and then she was put in house arrest, and I met my mother for the first time again when I was like 6 or 7. And she was 6 months pregnant with my brother. And all I remember thinking was, oh, I always thought that my mother was pretty. In all the pictures, she looked really pretty. Now I thought, well, she's rather fat, because I obviously didn't know that she was carrying a baby. But here's a little story that I don't think I put in my book, and that just dawned on me the other day. And I think sort of contributed to my mental health psyche, which was my grandfather was dying of cancer, which I didn't know because I was 6. But he kept going to these sanatoriums, and he would come back. And then one time he came back, and I think he did a pilgrimage of some sort. And he came back with a little blue bottle of liquid. And he said, "This is the holy water from this and this shrine. And it's very important because if you open it and then you do the, blessing, and you ask for a wish, it will come true." And so I was handed this little bottle, and I thought, and I was kind of terrified because I thought, well, I can't just wish for the dusty Barbie doll in the window of our local toy store, because that's not a big enough of a wish. Like, I have to make a really significant wish. This has to be important. And I was too young to understand world hunger or world peace or any of that. So I was like, what is the right size wish for this magic potion that I'm holding? And then it came to me. I thought, oh, I would like my parents back. That's the right sized wish. And so I did it. I asked God, or whatever, Virgin Mary, whatever saint it was, and I did my little blessing with the water, and my mother literally arrived a week later.
Wow. That is amazing. You probably felt very powerful, or very something.
I felt like I had some really scary powers that like I had to be so careful, because I could do some real damage by wishing for the wrong thing. Like my wishes would come true, like these crazy wishes would come true. So I really had to be careful. Yeah.
What's interesting about your story is that it's like there are all these happenstances, and even in modeling, because from the way that it's written, modeling wasn't your like, oh my God, my dream, I can't wait to be a supermodel. No one even knew what that was at the time. Tell us a little bit about, you did your first cover in 84, Sports Illustrated, but I know you were in Sports Illustrated in 83, I think. Was that the first time?
That was the first time I was in Sports Illustrated. But mind you, I did my first cover in 1980, like maybe 2 weeks after arriving into Paris, of, like a junior magazine. And I had a lot of covers by the time I got the Sports Illustrated covers. So to me, it meant nothing. And also, I didn't live in the US. I lived in Paris. So I was like, Sports Illustrated, is that some like tennis catalog thing. And my agency was like, no, 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 no. No, it's like, it's really good. And I was like, well, I'm not sporty. I don't really want to do it. And they were like, no, 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 you got to do it. This is like a really big deal. And I was a little punk. I was 17 years old, and I was wearing my torn up T-shirt with a dead Kennedy saying "Too drunk to fuck" on the front, and I was like, I'm so cool. And that's what got off the plane in Jamaica to the Sports Illustrated crew that had booked me sight unseen for the first time. And I think initially really regretted it when I got off that plane. I'm like, whoa, what did we do?
What was it like for you, though, when the 84 cover came out? Because like you said, you had done many other covers, but this sort of catapulted you to a different level of visibility and fame.
Yeah, at first it was kind of beautiful and amazing because although I had been on so many covers already, I was known in the modeling world, in the fashion world. People know who Paulina was. Oh, Paulina, whatever unpronounceable last name, Paulina What's her name? That was generally. And they just used to use my first name because I was the only Paulina apparently in the fashion business at the time. But it was just within our sphere, within our world. And when it kind of got out to the broader public, and suddenly I had, kids, like young boys, 17, 18, that would track down my number and call me at home and ask me to go to their prom with them. And I'd go, wow, that's really nice of you. Sure, I'll go to the prom. Where is it? Well, it's in Ohio. Oh, okay. Maybe I'm not going to go then. Sorry. But in the very beginning, this kind of adulation from the population around, it felt very much like love, didn't it? It felt very much like, everybody cared about what I did, and everything I said was somehow either adorable or slightly offensive or funny. I got a lot of descriptions of being, they didn't call it unfiltered then, they called it not subversive exactly, but something in that style.
Got you. I get it. You wrote something really interesting on page 109. And I myself have been a therapist for 25 years, but I was actually a talent agent for supermodels and celebrities.
You're kidding.
Before. No. So many of the people, and you were a little bit before me, when you were really hitting was about 5 years before me. But so many of the people you talk about in the book, I'm like, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. And how you describe the industry. And I've really become sort of an expert on fame. Anyway, so what you were talking about fame, and one line that you said, I just underlined it immediately. Fame replaces connections with assumptions. And I was like, oh my God, it's so true. And the experience of how it feels like love because you're getting all of this, but that what you really came to and what you share in the book is that it's not love because people are projecting onto you. You're like a blank page. They're projecting their desires for who you would be or how you would be. And that almost like the more famous you become, the less authentically known you are.
Exactly.
I was like,
the more you're seen, the less you're heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And that people think they know you, but they actually don't. So what I think is so powerful and beautiful about this book is that it's this collection of essays that you've chosen to share from different parts of your life. But what I felt in reading it was that I was actually having the privilege of getting to know you in a way that, even though I was very familiar with your career prior to reading this book and very familiar with your Instagram stuff, this gave me, from your voice, a real look into this really extraordinary life that you've had and a lot of extraordinary pain. You've had so many peak experiences. And so moving into, you talk about being between Betty White, J.Lo and Betty White, right? This is one of your hashtags, which I loved. And I think that was the beginning of when I was like, oh my God, she's so right. So let's talk a little bit more about, if you would, what do you mean when you say between J.Lo and Betty White?
Well, that one is easy. That one I came up with when I was probably it might have been an Instagram post when I thought about how women, being an older women and having turned sort of invisible, and how to fix the invisibility, to do something about the invisibility, you can either make yourself look younger so that you don't look, 40-ish, 50-ish, 60-ish, 70-ish, or I guess you can sort of address the shame instead, the shame that comes with, being put aside and told you're no longer relevant or valuable. I was looking for representation of women our age. I was looking to see a woman that looked like me with the wrinkles and the slight jowls and the crepey neck, because I find it in my friends. I have friends that don't have the money to do this stuff, and so they have natural faces, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. I actually think they're more beautiful now than they were prettier back, in their young, smooth days, but now they have character. There's like, they really become who they are. They're unique in their faces are the maps of their lives that they have lived that are so unique to them. And I adore it. I think it's beautiful. And I realize that there really doesn't seem to be anybody but me out there that thinks that this is attractive. And that the representation of women in their 40s and 50s is, we're power players. We're amazing. J.Lo, she's 50 something, and she sure as hell does not look 50. She's 39 at best. And it sort of got me realizing that we are only valuable as long as we don't look our age. We are permitted to be our age, but we can't look it. And then, so if you are our age, you become invisible. There's like very little representation of women like you and I out there. This is why also, I followed you partly because of all the brilliant stuff that you say and I learned from you, but also because I love your face. I think you're so beautiful. And I love Naomi Watts. I think she's so beautiful. Like, the women that I recognize, that's like, oh, you sort of look a little bit like me. It makes me so happy. And I realized there was a giant hole between, being celebrated for like aging with grace. Look at J.Lo. She's not aging at all. To adorable little old lady Betty White. And then you get like a little bit, then you get back in the limelight again a little bit, especially if you dress up and wear funky glasses and you're like, cool. Like, she's a really cool old lady. Isn't she adorable? And I'm like, I'm the woman in between there. Like, I don't fit either one of those two, and I am not represented.
All right. So you said, so with you on all this. So on page 207, you said, I have to choose between battling two wars, either the war against invisibility or the war for self-acceptance. And my friend, that hit different, where the thought of, that's exactly what it is. Am I going to? And I think you are leading the charge because, Paulina, you're talking about the way that it is, but let's recognize that in doing what you're doing, you're beating a path, you're changing something. You are courageous. I believe this, not just courageous to be your beautiful self, but you're courageous to speak to the powers that be, to say, this is bullshit, to say, I'm struggling with it, right? Those wars are real for all of us, especially if you have a public platform, if you're in the public eye, if there's visibility, right? Especially if you have to see your face, right? Normal people are not seeing videos of themselves every friggin' day, like on their feed. But if you have a visible life, there's a different way of looking at it. And I just want to acknowledge that this book like really, really inspired me to ask the questions, because here's the thing. It is deciding about what we'll do. And it's funny, the invisibility piece personally, it's more for me about, will I fight for the radical self-acceptance? And it's funny, I used to always say, people would say to me when I represented Naomi Campbell and all these different people, like, oh, does it make you feel insecure representing all of these supermodels, which I always thought was funny. And
a little bit rude.
Definitely rude. And the truth is it didn't, because the thing that I always valued in myself, honestly, was my brain. And I was like, I know nobody has this brain. I'm not saying this brain is perfect, but this brain is my brain, and I've got original thoughts, and I'm going to do great stuff in the world. But in being on sort of the other end, right? I was the one negotiating the contracts and then sort of having this public platform for this period of time. This is real, what you're talking about. And I love the visibility that you're bringing and the deep inquiry about. My question for myself is, how do I want to age? How will I age? It's so funny. Even before the book came out, I did a vlog on this, just bringing up the inquiry. How do you want to age? And my decision was, I want to do it well, and I want to do it holding on to my cognitive functioning as long as possible. Like, that was sort of my priority, and vanity, and I want to look great, and all of those things too. But I think that you're opening a dialogue and you're shining a light into like this dark corner of where we suffer. We suffer from this invisibility, of this messaging that we should be endlessly chasing the fountain of youth. And even if you have all the money in the world, do you do the facelift? Do you not? Like, you had said something, I watched an interview you did the other day, and it was on Tamara, I think, where you were saying everyone we see in the public eye, like, stops aging at 39. Like, you just do.
Yeah.
How are you 50 something, but you literally still look 39? And again, I feel like you're not shaming and you're not bashing, but the inquiry is there. So what has the feedback been for you on this?
I keep getting choked up over here. Thank you, Terry.
You're
The
welcome.
feedback has been sort of overwhelming and completely unexpected, because I kind of went into it like I go into everything, apparently, naively. I'm really good at just barging ahead and not checking the depth of the water on anything. I just like, go, figure it out later. I was talking about myself, and I was trying to be really honest about how I feel about this, in hopes that maybe there would be a woman or two that would go, oh, I know what you mean. And then I wouldn't have to feel alone. I didn't realize that I was going to make them feel not alone as well, and that I could represent something for other women, which is an option in we have options in aging. We have options in, well, not in aging, we all age, but we have options in how we approach aging. And that's, yeah, from taking good care of yourself or bad care of yourself. I mean, we have all these options, but the ones that we are most shamed for is the way we look. And that's where, that's where things get really sharp, because if you have things done, then boo you, because you're taking the easy way out and you're a rich bitch who can afford it. Or
Mm-hmm.
you don't do it, and then you're like, grandma, get some Botox, you're looking really haggard. So there's like no way to win for a woman. If you choose to do something about it, to do something about the shame that's getting heaped on you by fixing your face, then you're going to get shamed for that. And if you don't do it, you're going to get shamed for that too. So to me, it just made sense to try to eliminate the shame that I felt when people told me I was old and ugly and that was not viable anymore, rather than acquiesce to their desires and make myself look the way they think I should look. Because really, there's nothing wrong with my face. It's a 57-year-old face. I think I look age appropriate. Done. That all these women took that as me holding a little lamp and forging my way, up ahead where it's dark. Unbelievable. I had no idea anybody was following me.
Yes, we are.
And yes, you are. And I am amazed and gratified. And it feels like it's like giving me the purpose that I have been looking for, the purpose of how do I take what I've been given, which is the physical and the mental and whatever, the hodgepodge that makes me, right? But also what I've accomplished in my career and what I'm known for. Because obviously now, if I go out and I do something entirely different, what my experiences won't necessarily be valuable. So with the scope of my experiences and who I am, this has given me a purpose. Like I actually can maybe do something about this, if only to raise a conversation and make women think about it. Like you have options. Yes, you can do Botox. Yes, you can like make your face younger. Why not? If it makes you feel great, go for it. But you should also be able to feel great about yourself without it, because your face is not wrong. It's not sick. Like having wrinkles is not a disease.
Right. There's nothing wrong with you. You know what I think you did though, what with this book and when I think with this movement, because this is what it feels like to me as a movement, you put it like, well, there's two ways, right? You do it and then you get shamed. You don't do it and then you get shamed. Or we decide that what we think matters. This is what I see you creating this path, because I'm positive that what I think matters. And when you think about all of this being pleasing to others, right? It's so much codependency. It is
Yeah.
so much value out. Like if you think I'm okay, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
And what changes in the world if we normalize female aging the same way men are allowed to age? Look, they're debonair. I mean, I remember when I was first a commercial agent and they would be doing casting for the wives. So the husbands were like 48 and they were like, so we're looking for a 22-year-old to
Yeah.
play the wife, the housewife. I'm like, why are you looking for a 22-year-old? And this was in the late 80s, the mid 80s, where even then, or even more then, there
Even
was
more
so
so
much.
then, because back then they didn't have as much of a choice of a 40-year-old that looked 20. Now there are those choices.
Right. Well, I like the third path that you are creating. Another thing that I wanted to say from the book, because there were just so many great things that I underlined and absolutely loved, but you talked quite a bit about the heartbreak that you experienced in your, people may or may not know, you and Rick separated, but you stayed living together. He got sick in the end of life. You were taking care of him. It really seemed like you were still being best friends and that was important to you in your life. And then this very shocking being cut out of the will, or the will being changed, happened. And that was devastating to you, correct?
Yeah.
So, and I know you've been through all of that, but how are you now with that?
Uh, so the grief for my husband, the missing him, I don't think is ever going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
That he's not here anymore, and when your boy gets, um, you know, get engaged and his dad is not here, it's all of that. I think that's going to stick with us forever, and that's okay. That's just what I don't. Grief is not like a resolvable thing. It's just what you get given, and then you figure out how you're going to carry it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The anger of the betrayal, that was a little different, because he was lying. He lied about what he wanted to disinherit me on the basis of a lie, and it just seemed so vicious at the time, so unprovoked, so contrary to everything I believed. I mean, we had just, a few months earlier, we had, even like as I was taking care of him, prior to his death, I would get dinner, I would make dinner, I would bring it to him. We would kiss each other good night.
Mm-hmm.
How do you then write a letter that says my wife abandoned me when she's giving you a good night kiss every night to make sure you're okay, and to let you know that she's there for you?
Right.
Um, that part that part lingered for really hard for a while, and I say in the book it got partly cured by this man I fell in love with, who left me as
Mm-hmm.
I was selling my house, because then it feels like all my anger and all my heartbreak just kind of spilled onto him.
Mm.
I think I had a lot of unresolved issues with Rick, and I just put it all on top of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a way, it's like I've forgiven my husband, but I haven't forgiven my boyfriend, which is kind of
Right.
messed up because, the boyfriend just walked away from me because he didn't want to be with me. My husband actually lied. So,
Right.
but I guess I also say that in the book that to a certain extent, this is how fucked up I am, is that viciousness made me feel eventually down the road like he still cared. Like he was angry enough to care.
Right.
So there was still some love left for me.
Right. Because it wasn't indifference, right?
It
What do they
wasn't
say? The
indifference.
opposite of love is in hate.
It's
It's
indifference.
indifference.
Yeah. And I got to test that firsthand.
Yeah, indeed. I want to read one last passage from the book that I really, really loved. It's not that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's that what doesn't kill you makes your heart bigger if you let it. In the process of mending your heart, you can make it better. You can cut out the assumptions and the judgments and stitch in generosity. You can rip out shame and sew in self-acceptance. Then you can stuff the whole lot with love and embroider it with gratitude. So beautiful. Paulina, you did such a wonderful job. I so appreciate you spending time with us. I know this book is available right now, people. The author is Paulina Porizkova. I hope I said it right. The
Yes.
book is No Filter, The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful. It is available right now, people. You want it. Go get it.
Oh, Terry, thank you so, so much. You have no idea how thrilling it is for me who follows you and respects you and looks up to you and takes inspiration from you and from what you say to hear those kind words from you. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on.